Two bearing shells laid side by side on a shop bench under a work light. Same engine family, same 78,000 miles on the odometer. One came out of a car that spent its whole life in Phoenix, the other out of the same model that lived in coastal Oregon. The Oregon shell looks almost boring. Uniform dull gray overlay, the faint circular machining marks. From the factory still catching the light, the edges near the parting line sharp and clean. Now look at the other one. Across the middle of the load-carrying half, there's a band maybe 15 millimeters wide, where the gray has gone glassy and bright, like it's been polished by something. And right at the two outer edges of that band, a faint copper blush is showing through. Not scored, not gouged, just thinner. The overlay layer that's supposed to be sitting on top of the copper alloy substrate has worn down enough in that one strip that the color underneath is starting to whisper through. Two shells, one difference in service life that anybody can name from across the room: ambient temperature. Now, is that proof? No, it's one pair on one bench, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But it's the kind of thing that makes you want to understand the actual numbers instead of the internet arguments. So let's go get them. Here's the thing about the grades we're comparing. When you read 0W-8 and 0W-16 on a bottle, almost everybody focuses on the wrong number first, the 0W. The W stands for winter, and that first number is a cold temperature rating. It describes how the oil behaves when it's freezing out, how easily it can be cranked and pumped at low temperature. Both of these grades are 0W. Identical. That number tells you nothing whatsoever about how the oil behaves when it's 118 degrees Fahrenheit outside and you've been on the interstate for 2 hours. The second number is the one that matters for heat, and even that number gets misread. Under SAE J300, which is the standard that defines all of these grades, an SAE 8 oil has to land between 4.0 and just under 6.1 centistokes of kinematic viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius. An SAE 16 has to land between 6.1 and just under 8.2 centistokes at that same temperature. So on paper, 0W-16 is thicker when hot. Fine, most people stop there. But kinematic viscosity at 100 degrees isn't the number that decides whether metal touches metal. There's a second specification hiding inside J300 that almost never makes it into a video thumbnail, and it's the whole spine of this comparison. It's called high temperature, high shear viscosity, HTHS. It's measured at 150 degrees Celsius at a shear rate of 1 million per second, because that's roughly the brutality of what's actually happening inside a loaded main bearing at speed. And here are the two numbers you should tape to your toolbox. Under J300, an SAE 8 grade has an HTHS minimum of 1.7 millipascal seconds. An SAE 16 grade has an HTHS minimum of 2.3 millipascal seconds. That's roughly 35% more minimum high shear film strength for the 0W-16 by specification, by design, on purpose. Nobody's hiding this. It's published. It just never gets explained. So what does that difference physically mean? Picture two bricks stacked on each other, and your job is to keep them from touching. Slip a business card between them, and you've got a real measurable layer holding them apart. Now pull the card out and slip in a single sheet of thin paper instead. Still a layer, still doing a job. But there is less of it, and the margin for anything going wrong just got smaller. HTHS is the number that tells you whether you're working with a card or a sheet of paper once everything's hot and loaded. The real-world consequence lives in microns. In a healthy engine, bearing at operating temperature, the oil film thickness separating the journal from the shell is commonly on the order of 1 to 3 microns. The surface roughness of the parts themselves is often in the range of a couple of tenths of a micron. Do you see how little headroom that is? You're not comparing a thick cushion to a thin one. You're comparing two very thin ones, where losing half a micron changes whether the high spots on two surfaces ever say hello to each other. And why does that matter to you? Because bearing overlay is a consumable. Once it's gone in a strip, it doesn't grow back. Now watch this, because the mechanism that creates that film is genuinely elegant, and it explains everything that follows. Think of an air hockey table. The puck doesn't float because the air is thick. It floats because the air is being dragged into a converging gap and pressurized by motion. Stop the blower, and the puck sits down on the surface immediately. A spinning crankshaft journal does the same thing. It drags oil into a narrowing space inside the bearing clearance and generates pressure that lifts the shaft off the shell. That converging space is called the hydrodynamic wedge, and it's the reason your engine's bearings aren't in contact right now. Bearing clearance is just the size of the gap between shaft and shell, and it's tiny, often somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 40 microns on a small modern engine, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. Designers pick that gap deliberately, and they pick it alongside a specific oil viscosity and a specific oil pump. Those three things are one decision, not three. Remember that, because it comes back later and it's the part most videos get flatly wrong. Here's where heat walks in. Viscosity falls as temperature rises, and it falls fast. On a hybrid crossover doing gentle suburban driving in mild weather, sump oil temperature tends to sit somewhere around 95 to 105 degrees Celsius. Put that same car on a desert interstate at 80 miles per hour, in 45 degrees Celsius ambient with the air conditioning fighting for its life, and reported sump temperatures in the 125 to 135 range stop being exotic. That's a 30-degree swing, and the oil film inside the bearing runs hotter still than the sump does, because the bearing is where the heat is being made. So the film gets thinner exactly when the load is highest. Both grades lose viscosity on that climb. The question is, what's left? At the bottom, and that's where the 1.7 versus 2.3 floor stops being trivia. When the hydrodynamic film thins enough that surface high spots begin carrying part of the load, you've entered boundary lubrication. That's the paper instead of the card. In boundary conditions, you're relying on the additive chemistry, the anti-wear, and friction modifier compounds to protect the metal rather than on a pressurized film. Modern additive packages are genuinely good at this, but wear rates in boundary lubrication are associated with being meaningfully higher than in full hydrodynamic operation, and that shows up over tens of thousands of miles as a polished band, like the one on that bench. Bench testing on ultra-low viscosity oils, including work presented through SAE technical papers over the last decade, has consistently shown two things worth your attention. First, film thickness measurements in instrumented bearings drop non-linearly as oil temperature climbs past roughly 120 degrees Celsius, meaning the last 10 degrees cost you more film than the previous 10 did. Second, the ranking between grades holds under load. A formulation meeting the SAE 16 HTHS floor retained measurably more film than one sitting near the SAE 8 floor at the same temperature and the same specific load. But wait, let me be precise about what that does and doesn't establish. Those measurements were taken on test rigs and instrumented engines, not on your Corolla in July. They don't tell you a 0W-8 engine is going to have a problem. They tell you the margin between comfortably floating and occasionally touching is smaller with 0W-8, and that heat plus load is what spends that margin. Smaller margin isn't the same as insufficient margin. That distinction is the entire honest version of this topic, and it's why I want to give Toyota's side properly before I give you mine. So why do these grades exist at all? Not for marketing. Every liter of oil your pump moves and every liter your crankshaft has to churn through costs energy, and that's called pumping loss. Back to the air hockey table. Running the blower takes real electricity, and a thicker medium would take more. Thinner oil reduces the work of moving it and the drag of stirring it. And on Atkinson cycle hybrid engines that live at modest loads, that recovered energy shows up as genuine measured fuel economy, typically a low single-digit percentage, which sounds small until you multiply it across millions of vehicles. And Toyota didn't just pour thin oil into an old design. These engines were built around it. Bearing clearances were tightened. Low-tension piston rings reduce cylinder wall drag. Surface finishes were improved so that the high spots that would rely on a thicker film are simply less prominent. Oil galleries and pump displacement were sized to that specific viscosity. The standards followed the hardware too. Jasso created the GLV1 specification specifically to cover 0W-8 and 0W-12 oils. And ILSAC GF6B exists as a separate category specifically for 0W-16, precisely because these grades needed their own wear and durability testing, rather than being judged by the old rules. Now here's the part of Toyota's defense that I think is genuinely strong and that critics skate past. On a hybrid, the engine isn't running all the time. In traffic, at lights, coasting on gentle acceleration under battery power, the combustion engine is simply off. Compare two cars in identical Phoenix weather on identical commutes, and the hybrid's engine may accumulate substantially fewer minutes at sustained high oil temperature than the conventional car's does. Less time hot is less time spending margin. That's not a talking point. That's physics working in their favor. And the biggest correction I can offer, if you're the kind of owner who's already reaching for a thicker bottle, is this. Thicker is not automatically safer. If your engine was specified, for 0W-8, the pump, the clearances, the oil passage cross-sections, and the hybrid's cold start strategy were all designed around that flow rate. Going up 2 grades can slow the rate at which oil reaches the top of the cylinder head on a cold morning, which is when a large share of engine wear tends to occur anyway. It can also alter how the variable valve timing system responds, since VVT actuators are hydraulic devices tuned to a particular oil behavior. Trading a slightly thicker hot film for slower cold start delivery and lazier cam phasing may be a losing trade. In my assessment, it often is. So where does the margin actually get thin? Let me be specific instead of dramatic. Sustained high-speed driving in high ambient heat is the profile that concerns me most. because it defeats the hybrid's own protection. At 80 miles per hour up a long grade with the air conditioning at maximum, the engine isn't shutting off, the battery isn't carrying you. You're running a small combustion engine near continuous high output, while the ambient air can't cool anything effectively. That's the one case where a hybrid's duty cycle stops being an advantage and starts looking like a conventional car's, only with less displacement doing the work. Add load, and it compounds. A roof box for adults, luggage, a small utility trailer where the vehicle permits one. Higher specific load on the bearings means the hydrodynamic wedge has to generate more pressure to maintain the same film at the exact moment temperature is reducing its ability to do so. Two forces pushing the same direction. Extended oil change intervals matter here too, because fuel dilution from direct injection operation is associated with reducing HTHS below the fresh oil value. And an oil that started near the SAE 8 minimum has less room to give. There's one more case people miss. Some non-hybrid Toyotas were factory filled with 0W-16 as well, and those engines run continuously with no electric assist at all. If that's your car in a hot climate, you're the group with the least built-in thermal relief, even though your grade has the higher HTHS floor of the two we're discussing. So let's turn all of that into something you can act on, and let's do it conditionally, because the right answer genuinely depends on which car you're sitting in. If your engine is factory specified for 0W-16, you live somewhere like Phoenix or Riyadh, and you tow nothing and carry normal loads, then stay on 0W-16. Keep it a full synthetic oil meeting ILSAC GF6B, and consider shortening your interval toward the severe service schedule in your manual rather than changing grade. You already have the higher HTHS floor of the two. Time is your lever, not thickness. If you're doing sustained high-speed desert driving in a hybrid, especially loaded or up long grades, then the highest value moves are the boring ones. Reduce the interval meaningfully. Verify your cooling system is genuinely healthy, since coolant temperature sets the floor under oil temperature. Consider a used oil analysis at your next change, because bearing and cylinder wear metals in parts per million will tell you what's actually happening in your engine rather than what happened on somebody's bench. And if your manual explicitly permits a heavier alternate grade for high ambient temperatures, that's a documented option worth discussing with a mechanic who knows these engines. If your engine was designed for 0W-8, do not assume thicker is safer. The pump, the tight bearing clearances, and the hybrid's cold start strategy were designed around that flow, so the correct response is to stay on the specified grade, insist on an oil carrying the JASO GLV1 approval rather than a generic thin oil, shorten the interval in extreme heat, and never let the level sit low. Oil film thickness in microns depends on having enough oil in the sump to keep the pump fed and enough volume to carry heat away. Low level and high heat is a bigger risk than grade every time. Here's your one physical action this week, and it takes about 4 minutes. Pop the hood and read the grade stamped or printed on the oil filler cap. Then open your owner's manual to the fill quantity page and read the exact capacity along with the maintenance section. While you're there, look specifically for whether Toyota lists an alternate grade permitted for high ambient temperatures, because some markets and some engines do and some flatly don't. Knowing which camp your car is in changes your options completely, and right now most owners genuinely don't know. And let me say the obvious thing plainly because you deserve it said out loud. This is general information, not a service recommendation for your specific vehicle, and your own owner's manual, plus a Toyota literate mechanic who can see your car are the final word over anything I or anyone else says on the internet. The honest version of all this is unsatisfying, and I think that's fine. 0W-16 carries more high temperature, high shear margin than 0W-8 by specification, 2.3 against 1.7 millipascal seconds. And heat plus sustained load is what consumes that margin. Toyota's reasoning for going thinner is real, measurable, and defensible, and their hybrid duty cycle argument holds up better than critics admit. Neither of those statements cancels the other. The nuance is the answer. If this saved you from either panic buying a thicker oil your engine wasn't built for, or from ignoring heat that genuinely deserves respect, that's the whole point of what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you actually drive and what grade you're running. I want the hot climate owners specifically, so Phoenix, Vegas, Texas, the Gulf, inland Australia, southern Spain, all of you. Include your engine and your mileage if you don't mind. I read these, and the regional pattern in the replies is going to shape what I test next. Subscribe if you want the follow-up, because the question I keep getting and haven't answered yet is what the 0W-8 transition means for engines already past 100,000 miles, where clearances have opened up and the original design assumptions start to drift. That one's coming, and it's going to be uncomfortable in the best way.